Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And it is draft season, so we've got Kendall Mursky back with us. You can find him on Twitter at Mursky Kendall. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Network and Picasso's Pizza. You can head on over right now to picassospizza.net. They are the flagship, I can't speak this evening, ship sponsor of this podcast for Great Western New York locations, Williamsville, West Seneca, Blaisdell, and Lancaster. Call or visit picassospizza.net. They got their old school delivery for people who live nearby. They got DoorDash for people depending on their distance. And if you live outside of Western New York, you can still get that great Buffalo-style pizza. Yes, I'm talking about those cup and char pepperonis. If you head on over to picassospizza.net, you can order from anywhere in the continental U.S. The frozen pizzas delivered from Picasso's Pizza. One more time, picassospizza.net. They're the flagship sponsor of this program. And gentlemen, we are now 24 days away. I got to put the banner up here. We are now 24 days away from the NFL draft. So we are in the home stretch here. And tonight's kind of about doing the homework a little bit. You know, the Buffalo Bills went out and they added Von Miller. They added Shaq Lawson. They added Jordan Phillips. They added Daquan Jones, and they added Tim Settle. So it looks like maybe the Buffalo Bills need along the defensive line isn't there. But we got to do our homework. We got to work our way through the various positions and the various draft boards. So tonight, once we do get to defensive ends and interior defensive lineman draft prospects, is all going to be about who fits the Bills. Where does a guy, maybe if he drops, present such a good value that we have to take the guy in that position? And could the value of somebody be at 25 so high that we have to take them? So we're going to dig into the nitty gritty of that tonight. But first, just a couple of, Bills topics to get this evening started, because it's a football night, right? There's no basketball game or anything on that anyone might be watching. There might be more people listening or watching on demand than usual because of that national championship game tonight. But Kendall, I want to lead things off with you because a report came out today. The Buffalo Bills' second confirmed pre-draft or top 30 visit is with Texas A&M running back Isaiah Spiller. He is your running back number one. I made the comment today. I don't have Isaiah Spiller number one. I have Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker III ahead of him. I would prefer other running backs go to the Buffalo Bills because I personally don't like the fit. I'm a man who has a need for speed at running back. Kendall, talk me off the ledge here. If the Buffalo Bills do at some point select Texas A&M running back Isaiah Spiller, what kind of player are they getting?
What I will say is he's definitely not the speed demon that Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker are. Yeah, like he ran a 4.6 40, but I'll follow that up by saying he does not play like he ran a 4.6 40. He plays much faster than that. He plays at a very good pace in between the tackles, and he shows breakaway ability at times, especially at the SEC level. That's something you should covet and take not with a grain of salt, but take seriously. So it's not to the level of Breece Hall. It's not to the level of Kenneth Walker in terms of that breakaway potential, but his vision and his nuance to the position, the way that he can read the second level defenders and know when to hit the gap and how he ties that vision back to his footwork. He's got great foot fire and really, really great at knowing when to link that vision to his footwork. And when he sees that hole, he hits that hole. And not only does he hit it, but he hits it with physicality, and he's tough to tackle. He's got great contact balance. And lastly, his passing game impact is there. I mean, a lot of people kind of look at the 4.6 40 and like, Judge, you said it today, you'll look at that RAS score and you'll be like, I'm scared, man. I'm scared of running backs with low RAS scores. And it's understandable. I mean, recency bias, why wouldn't we be scared of that as Bills fans? But the difference with Spiller is, one, he plays like a better back than his RAS would suggest, but he also has passing game impact on tape. He's a good pass blocker, and he's a good pass catcher, and he's a good playmaker once he gets the ball in his hands in open space. So I think those three things combined can kind of soften the blow of thinking, oh, this is just another low RAS, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss type of third round selection type of guy. So it's not to that level, but I do
Mhm.
understand the concerns where people are coming from if they
But
do equate it to that.
and here's where my issue is. My issue is he just seems like a chalked up version of Devin Singletary. You're just getting Devin Singletary with turbo, a guy who, he's got, he's a dynamic player who he can, knock off, 10, 15-yard runs. He's a guy who can catch dump offs and maybe do something with catching a dump off. And he's a decent pass blocker. But when we talk about wanting to add another dimension to the running game, you're trying to look for something more dynamic than a Devin Singletary. And this just seems like Devin Singletary on turbos. It doesn't seem like you're adding different dimensions like a guy like Breece Hall or a guy like Rashad White, or even a guy like Brian Robinson Jr. would add. It just seems like you're adding a souped up version of Devin Singletary to replace Devin Singletary, whose UFA contract is up.
But
That's my issue, because
no,
it
you're
could work
right.
for you if you like Devin Singletary and you're like, hey, a slightly better Devin Singletary is good. That's something that might fit for you. But I don't know. I feel like I'm looking for more.
No, but what you're saying there is right, where it's like he's Singletary with turbo, a little bit faster. And if
Mhm.
you're saying, I think he's more than that, but if you're saying that and you think he's to a lesser extent of the Breece Halls and the Kenneth Walkers, there's not something wrong with falling in the middle of Kenneth
Mhm.
Walker, Breece Hall athleticism, and Devin Singletary athleticism. There's a lot of gray area in between. And if you're content with what Devin Singletary did in the last, whatever, 6-7 weeks of the season, imagine that with a little bit of extra juice, a little bit extra yards after contact, a little bit
Mhm.
more breakaway speed, a little bit more in just about every category. There's something to be said about well-roundedness. And I understand the intrigue to
Mhm.
breakaway ability, because it is that added dimension that I think a lot of people can agree, and I would agree, that this offense needs. But it's
Yeah.
not the only thing that this offense needs, because maybe if Devin Singletary just had a little bit more turbo, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Mhm.
So it's all an unknown thing, but
Yeah.
it is each their own kind of thing when it comes to evaluating running backs in really every position.
Dave, how about you? Isaiah Spiller. I see enough smoke around some teams,
Mhm.
the New York Giants, the Atlanta Falcons. I know Tampa Bay, there was a lot of smoke around Isaiah Spiller before they went and re-signed Leonard Fournette. I think if we wanted Isaiah Spiller, we'd have to pull the trigger at 57, but there are some people who think he could slip into and you could get him in the third round. Where would you be willing to pull the trigger, Dave, on a player like Isaiah Spiller?
Third round for me. He's not in my top three. He's not in my top three running backs as of right now for this class. I have Hall 1, Walker 2, Brian Robinson 3 is my top three right now.
Mhm.
With Spiller coming in at 4, just outside the top 3. And the reason is more so that at this stage of what I would want for the Bills, right? I don't think it's really a knock on Spiller as a player, because I think at a different time and a different, let's say, a different point in time in this Bills run, or if they were like going through like a different phase in this sort of like at the beginning, if they were going through their rebuild and they were wanting to add a guy like that,
Mhm.
I think it's different now. I think now, with the way this offense has kind of been put together, it's pretty evident that at wide receiver, the Bills have Diggs. They've got Davis. Obviously, they brought in Crowder. They've got McKenzie back. Like they're deep and they're talented at receiver. They're deep now. Well, I shouldn't say deep. They're talented, not so deep at tight end between OJ Howard and Knox, but really two tight. If you have two good tight ends, that's deep right now in the
Mhm.
NFL. Where they're not deep and where they're not like, I would say, like scaring you so much is at the running back position. So I like Devin Singletary. He played great down the stretch last year, and I think Devin Singletary is totally competent as a running back. But for me, Isaiah Spiller doesn't move the needle enough for me to differentiate himself enough from Devin Singletary. He does differentiate, so I don't
Mhm.
want to get it twisted like that. He does differentiate from
Yeah, I
Devin
think that's fair.
Singletary, but he doesn't differentiate himself enough for me to say if the Bills were going to go and put high draft capital into the running back position, and it was going to be Isaiah Spiller, for me, that high draft capital shouldn't come before the second round or earlier. That's just my
Yeah.
personal opinion.
And this is something that we're going to get into here because I actually told you guys the first segment I wanted to do was I was listening to Locked On Bills with Joe Marino this morning, and I didn't write the statistic down, and I wanted to, but he had a statistic, and you can go and you can obviously listen to his podcast. Most of you probably have already. And he talked about how a majority of Josh Allen's completions, almost 3/4 of Josh Allen's completions in his career, have gone to wide receivers. So obviously there are only 3 position groups you could throw the football to: running back, tight end, wide receiver. 3/4 pretty much statistically, I don't have the exact number in front of me, of Josh Allen's completions have gone to wide receivers throughout his career. So the question you got to ask yourself is, do the Bills need to double down, triple down at wide receiver and keep on drafting more wide receivers, churn that position to give Josh Allen sort of his finger quotes bread and butter weapons? Or is this an indicator that we need to make our offense more multiple? We've already started showing that maybe that might be something we're interested in with the signing of OJ Howard, with the almost signing of JD McKissick. And that's where my issue with Isaiah Spiller comes in, because like I said, I think Isaiah Spiller could come in and he could be a really cool guy to split carries with Devin Singletary. And then in 2023, be the lead dog. But that's not what I'm really interested in. I don't want another Devin Singletary or even Devin Singletary on turbos. I'm looking for one of 2 things in this draft class. I'm looking for a bona fide 3-down back to come in here and just straight up replace Devin Singletary, a guy like Breece Hall, or I'm looking for someone to complement Devin Singletary like a JD McKissick would have, whether that be a Rashad White or a James Cook or a Tyler Beatty later on in the draft, or even a Ty Chandler. I'm looking for one of those 2 things. Go get your Devin Singletary replacement in the draft next year. I don't need the Devin Singletary replacement in the draft this year. I need it next year. I need someone to be like flat out bona fide, more dynamic than Devin Singletary and be our all-purpose guy, or I just need a compliment to him right now. What do you think? What do you think this offense needs, Kendall?
I definitely think it's the multiplicity thing. I think as great as the keeping your fastball thing is, I still think adding a running back to this offense is something we haven't seen. It's just an untapped portion of this offense that we just haven't seen yet. In the greatness that we've seen since 2020, it's been Josh Allen, his arm, his legs, and passing to wide receivers, and then sprinkle in a little bit of Dawson Knox. Imagine if we get a little bit more from Dawson Knox, like we got last year, but then now you're sprinkling in some OJ Howard, and you're sprinkling in whoever this new running back is. There's so much more for defenses to game plan, and thus opening stuff up for that fastball. If you have a great curveball, if you have a great changeup, that fastball becomes even more effective than it was on its own as just a Aroldis Chapman 105-mile-an-hour fastball. If you can match it with some sort of off-speed pitch, you make that offense so tough to defend. So I've been preaching multiplicity, finding a way to take pressure off of Josh Allen in that way for 2 years now, since the breakout season in 2020. But I mean, to an extent, you got to let Josh cook. I mean, I totally understand that. Like, he is the offense, but you don't want to kill his longevity for the sake of letting him cook and keeping that fastball as the fastball. You got to find some off speed.
Dave, what do you think? Because I don't know. I mentioned this on the show multiple times last year when I was like, we need to find an upgrade over Tommy Sweeney. My biggest issue last year was I look at teams like Tampa Bay where they can go from 4 wide receiver spread into, 12 personnel or even, 21 personnel. And like a team like Tampa Bay can run the ball down your throat on one play and spread you out in the next. And I was always envious of that multiplicity. Do you think that's what the Buffalo Bills need? Or do you think we need to add more and more wide receivers and keep leaning into maybe Josh Allen as the power back at this offense?
No, I think you need to find a balance, right? And I think the Bills started going down that path a little bit last year. As much as Tommy Sweeney became sort of irrelevant to the team, the fact is they did incorporate Dawson Knox more into the offense last year, whereas in 2020 it was really, really heavy on the wide receivers, right? So again, Brian Daboll's gone now, so what's Ken Dorsey going to do to kind of add his wrinkles into this offense as well? But it was promising, at least last year, that we did see the Bills kind of make Dawson Knox more of a focal point of the offense to kind of complement the wide receivers. You know, I always make the point about the previous Chiefs teams and how they had, you know, Kelsey, Hill, you know, whether that was Clyde Edwards-Helaire or whoever it was, right, at running back, and they had a nice trio, and then those complementary receivers of Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, whatever. The Bills kind of went that way a little bit more last year, right? They had Knox more involved. They had the wide receivers with Stephon Diggs as the top. And now, if you want to really get that trifecta, in my opinion, and get that sort of third threat, something that scares you if you're an opposing defense. And I'm not saying Devin Singletary isn't competent or isn't effective, but like I would be pretty confident to say that probably most teams aren't scared of Devin Singletary hurting them, right? They're going to be more scared of the Bills' passing offense. And to an extent, you know, Steve, starting with that Patriots game, the Patriots game, we saw Josh kind of taking what the defense started doing more of taking what the defense was giving him. And we saw him being a little bit more effective and kind of not necessarily checking the ball down, but taking like the 6-7 yard play when it was there. If that continues and then the running backs maybe become a little bit more involved in the passing game, now all of a sudden it puts a lot of stress on the defense. And so that's where I kind of come out and like would like to see a more dynamic player at the running back position, because it's very easy to say, well, we don't need a dynamic running back because Josh and his wide receivers and Dawson Knox are great. But like, wouldn't you, as a fan of the team, want the defense to just be stressed even more as to what might happen? And that's where I come out, right? So more multiple. I'm with you guys both on that. And I think, to me, you can still invest in the wide receiver position while getting a dynamic running back, right? Like, you only really need to invest in one dynamic running back, right? Like at a given time. It's not like receivers where you want to have kind of 2, 3, even 4 guys that you have in your holster. Like, you just need one dynamic running back, right? And then Singletary can be a compliment, and maybe he's gone after 2022. But I'm starting to warm up to the fact of running back as a possibility in the second round, depending on who's there. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I am with this offense. I think that it's not a matter of like Josh like limiting the offense in the sense that like we have to throw the ball because we have Josh Allen. Like it's more about putting stress on the defense, and we already know how much stress Josh Allen puts on the defense. So why not add another stressor? That's where I am.
Speaking of the offensive scheme and the way the offense might be progressing into next season, Emmanuel Sanders was actually one of the co-hosts this morning on Good Morning Football. Sort of, they rotate who's in that Nate Burleson seat, and they've been doing that for a while now. And today was Emmanuel Sanders Day in that seat on Good Morning Football. It was must watch if you have a chance to go back, either catch the highlights or watch the episode in full. Emmanuel Sanders brought a ton of different insight onto Good Morning Football, both about the Bills, and he was also talking about like guys like Mitch Trubisky with the Steelers and, you know, Brian Dable, and he got to talk a little bit about the Giants and stuff. And they asked Emmanuel Sanders at one point in the show to make a prediction, and he made some awesome predictions that I think Bills Mafia would be excited about. He talked about how Josh Allen was going to be the 2022 league MVP. He talked about how Gabriel Davis was going to be a Pro Bowler this year. He talked about how the Buffalo Bills were going to win the Super Bowl this year. And as he was in sort of the middle of this take, you know, he paused in the middle of it and he started to like rethink it a little bit in the middle of this take. He's like, and he was talking about losing Brian Dable, and he kind of like stuttered in the middle of this take, but then he sort of got his confidence back and finished the take and made all of those predictions. So that's Emmanuel Sanders, a guy who had a chance to play under Brian Dable, was in rooms every day with Ken Dorsey, etc. So Dave, just like a fun little question here, because I'm sure, you know me, I look way too much into everything here, but are we maybe too confident that Ken Dorsey can pick up where Brian Dable left off?
I don't think we're too confident, because I think, at least in a lot of the people that I talk to and talking to you guys, is like, we know there's some unknowns still with Ken Dorsey. So it's not like I don't think it's fair to say like, oh, it's going to be exactly the same, or we know exactly what it's going to be like. I think we do expect that there's going to be some differences, and we think that there's a little bit of an unknown there with Ken Dorsey. But I also think that the fact that Josh Allen's your quarterback sort of, I don't want to say masks that, right? But it does give you confidence that no matter what is kind of put out there, the Bills are going to be successful on offense because they have Josh Allen. And it's not like Ken Dorsey's new to the room, right? He's been there. He's worked under Dable. He's going to have his own ideas, which could be good. It could be good, right? It could be beneficial ultimately to the team. We just don't know. But I don't think you're going to see. I don't think it's fair to say that we're overconfident, right? I think that we are. I think, at least me, I'm just like, it's all about Josh Allen for me. So like, I'm not as worried about the offensive coordinator's influence, I guess, because I think Josh is going to have so much influence anyway on the system.
We got Spin 0481 coming in saying, I think there could be a little bit of hiccups early on in the season while Dorsey adjusts to being the play caller, but by the playoff time, Dorsey will knock all that rust off, so to speak. And hey, I mean, that was pretty much the Buffalo Bills offense last year in a nutshell. I'm going back and I'm watching all the Bills games right now, and I mean, that offense was kind of clunky. I mean, all like that Patriots game was really where the light got turned on for this offense. I mean, even up like New Orleans, and like, don't get me wrong, by NFL standards, like stupid efficient. It's just scoring stupid amount of points, but you looked at it and you're like, man, they're like crushing these teams and they're still not like firing on all cylinders. And then you got to the New England game in the regular season. Then obviously you got to the New England game in the postseason. You're like, well, that's what happens when they don't look clunky. On top of crushing teams, they just like historically defeat teams. So, obviously it's gonna be hard for them to keep that pace. But I do think I think the Bills offense will be just fine in Ken Dorsey's hands. And Kendall, I'll get to you in a second too with your thoughts on it. But Steve Lynn comes in and says Sanders was such a key luxury last year. If Diggs got injured, Sanders is a great fill-in. If Diggs misses 2 games, what does our lineup look like this year? That's the one thing that's missing. Crowder and McKenzie are both slot receivers. So right now, if Diggs or Davis were to get hurt, it would be Isaiah Hodgins, it would be Marcus Stevenson, it would be Jake Kumaro. So that is one of the, I think, glaring holes on this Buffalo Bills roster is still that interchangeable third boundary receiver. So that's definitely something the Bills should look for. And that's why I mocked Tyquan Thornton to the Buffalo Bills in the third round of my mock draft Monday this morning, if you want to go check that out on Twitter. But Kendall, what are your thoughts? Chris Kepner comes in, says his hot take is Dorsey will be better than Dable. Ombre Lob says, I like how we say clunky, but they were still really dominant, but they're all on the same page. They're just the best team in the NFL. What are your thoughts on what this offense could look like under Ken Dorsey?
I think what I think is less about what I think about Ken Dorsey and way more about who we are as Bills Mafia and how we're not used to success and how we're getting a little overconfident and a little bit of hubris going on here with recent success. So that's kind of where I am with how everyone's talking about Ken Dorsey, like, rainbows and ponies and everything's going to be okay. Like come on, like we don't know yet. We don't know. There's so much unknown. Even like Joe Brady, like there's so much unknown. He flopped in Carolina, and I mean, his time in LSU, I don't even think he was actually the QB coach at LSU, and people attribute Joe Burrow's success to Joe Brady. So, I mean, there's a lot of unknown that's going to happen this year with the offense, and I think it's okay to say, like what you said, Tilt, we have Josh Allen. A lot of that stuff is alleviated. It's dampened, the effect that a new play caller is going to have, and any issues they may have could be mitigated a little bit by the success that is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and all the weapons. And Eric came in here and said that's why we're adding weapons, to make life easier for those offensive play callers and everyone that's new on this offensive coaching staff. So for me, it's less about like those coaches in particular and what they're going to do in year one, because I'm expecting them to struggle early. It's really about how they're going to gain that traction, gain that momentum through the season. And then hopefully they can live up to the hype, because right now Bills Mafia is hype, going into the season, Super Bowl betting odds champion. Like if they do anything worse, If we do anything worse than top 10 offense in the first like 4 weeks, people are going to be calling for Ken Dorsey's job.
Well, they were calling for Dable's job, so that's going to happen.
So that's kind of my thoughts really on Ken Dorsey. It's not that I think he's going to be amazing or I think he's going to be awful. I think he's going to be middling to start, and we have to be patient. But I think the potential is there, and we should be patient and let him grow with the offense and allow that to come to fruition, and then, give him a full evaluation period to really before we write him off.
All right. So that's going to bring us to the main topic of the show tonight, and that is sort of defensive line draft prospects. So we're going to work our way through the defensive line draft board. We're going to be talking about edge rush prospects. We're going to be talking about interior defensive line prospects. And the first thing I want to do here is I want to pull up the Buffalo Bills depth chart, because as I mentioned, the Buffalo Bills made some splash signings along the defensive line this offseason, which makes, yes, let's just all take a second to just admire the jersey swap of Von Miller. But, the Buffalo Bills made a huge makeover to this defensive line. I mean, if you look at it from right to left, the expected depth chart that you'll see heading into training camp at right end, Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, Mike Love. At the one tech, you're going to have Daquan Jones. I believe Tim Settle mentioned that he'd be playing a bunch of one tech, and you have obviously Eli Anku as well. At the three tech, you have Ed Oliver, Tim Settle, who could be doing a little bit of both. Then you have Jordan Phillips coming back, and you also have Brandon Bryant. Poor Brandon Bryant and Eli Anku, by the way. They're like, man, we finally got a chance. Nope, no, you don't. Nope. Maybe the practice squad again. And then over at left end, you got Gregory Rousseau, who I think is going to have a nice second year. Boogie Basham, who I'm looking forward to seeing his development. And the return of Shaq Lawson, who I have absolutely no expectations for. But hey, if he performs, he performs. So looking at that depth chart, you sit there and you're like, where are the holes? What could possibly be added? What could possibly be added to this depth chart? Dave, I'm going to start with you. Like, where is the hole? What could possibly need to be added?
I think you could still afford to add maybe a really, specialist run stuffing one tech type player. I think it is probably still something I would consider. I'm going to talk about one of my guys later that I think would be a nice sort of late draft round fill in for that. But Tim Settle kind of maybe bouncing between one tech, three tech. Like, I don't get that, right? To me, he screams three tech to me. I know people have said he's a one tech. But the way, I'll put it this way. His history and what he's done to this point in the NFL as a penetrating more of a pass rushing, more nimble defensive tackle screams to me more of like a three tech style than if he's going to be playing one tech and trying to stuff the run, which he hasn't really been as good at so far, right? He's still young. He can still probably improve there. But really, Daquan Jones to me he's the star of this Lotulelei of this year, right? Like, is there any true one tech behind Daquan Jones now? That star is gone. So for me, I still see an opportunity to add a beefier run stopping defensive tackle, two gapping defensive tackle at some point in this draft if the Bills were inclined. I don't think they really need to go look for a three tech in this draft.
And if you think about it too, Pete and Anna come in saying it's very possible to upgrade Phillips as the backup three tech. Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson are pretty much on the Isaiah McKenzie where I signed for like the candy in your pocket type of deals. Like, they weren't big deals. They were minimum deals. And if the value falls in a certain way in the draft, like, I don't know, say we're sitting at pick 57 and for some reason like Devontae Wyatt is still on the board. Like, I'm just throwing out some outlandish scenario here. Buffalo Bills can obviously take the three tech there and then just, go and cut Jordan Phillips at some point in training camp. Like, those contracts are not contracts, the Shaq Lawson and the Jordan Phillips contracts, not contracts that you're married to. Now, the Buffalo Bills probably signed both those guys so they could avoid having to draft guys there so they could take other positions.
Right.
But at the end of the day, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is there going to ever be a guy sitting on the board at a certain time where it's just like, it's going to be hard to pass that up. One of those guys could be David Ajabo. We'll get into that conversation later because, he's a guy who could have to redshirt a year or will have to redshirt a year with his torn Achilles. So that's something that's interesting. Kendall, what about you? Like, what holes do you see in this defensive line? Where could the Buffalo Bills possibly look to add in the 2022 NFL draft if they were looking to add a draft pick onto the defensive line?
I agree with Tilt. I think the one spot is really backup one tech. And a lot of that is pending on how they plan to use Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle. Because, yeah, I agree with everything Tilt said, especially about Tim Settle. Like, we broke him down in film room, and he's great in terms of what he does in pass rush. But what he tries to do in run stopping situations, he's just not quite there yet physically. He's there mentally. He knows what he has to do. He knows what his responsibilities are. But for whatever reason, when he tries to follow through on that and actually execute on the field, it just doesn't fully connect. So he's still, I think he'll be 25 at the start of the season.
He's
so
young still.
I don't want to write him off and say he can't run stop and he won't be able to play one tech. I think it's fair that the Bills brought him in as a hybrid type of guy that can play one tech and three tech. But it's kind of a wait and see thing for me. And because of that, I view backup one tech as the one position that I think could be drafted. And with that said, I mean, Eli Anku played pretty well in the spot chances he got last year, played with great energy and really did a pretty solid job holding down the line of scrimmage and, not allowing too much push from the interior offensive lineman on the other side of the ball. So I wouldn't completely shortchange him. I mean, he was brought back on a future deal, which means the Bills liked him at least enough to give him that. But we can't deny that is probably the one spot that deserves the most looks in the draft. Like if a Travis Jones falls further than possible, that's kind of one of those things. If one of those one techs just falls further than we think, then it begs the question, do we pull the trigger?
We got Pete and Anna coming in saying they've done their work on the Oklahoma and A&M 3 techs. I believe that would be DeMarvin Leal and Perion Winfrey. The question you have to ask yourself here, Pete, though, is the Buffalo Bills also have done their homework on Cade Otton, Trey McBride, and Jeremy Ruckert. Oh no, I got that one wrong. Cole Turner. They've done their work on some tight ends as well. That was at the combine before they signed OJ Howard, though. So the question is, when did they do their homework? So the Buffalo Bills probably did their homework on all of these draft prospects, but the question is also when. I think that plays an important role too, because if it was like, oh, it was a combine interview, oh, they pulled him aside at the Senior Bowl, this or that, those things all came before free agency. So, that should be interesting. So let's take a look at the first 3 rounds of the draft at edge rusher. And there are some edge rushers I want to take a look at. The consensus first rounders in this draft, there are 4 of them now, with David Ajabo falling out. The consensus first rounders are Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, Trayvon Walker, and Jermaine Johnson. There's a legitimate chance we could get out of the top 10, 12 picks, and all 4 of those guys are gone. It is very unlikely that you will see one of those guys slip out of the top 15. The one name to keep an eye on, I think a lot of people are just trying to tarnish his name to maybe drop him in the draft, is Kayvon Thibodeau from the University of Oregon, but I doubt he slips all the way to 25. That would be fun conversation to have on draft night. But some other guys who are like first, second round prospects, George Karlaftis is a guy who will probably go in the first round. That big power edge reminds a lot of people of a guy like Justin Smith out of Purdue, Boye Mafe from Minnesota. David Ajabo with that torn Achilles is still expected to go in the first 60 or so picks. And Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State has really risen up draft boards, a bendy edge. Cameron Thomas from San Diego State, Logan Hall. These guys are sort of the inside-outside flex type of guys. Joshua Pascal, who we had a conversation about at the Combine, sort of reminds us a little bit of Shaq Lawson. You got Sam Williams, who's got some serious off-the-field baggage, but, I mean, he tested out of this world at the Combine as an edge. Nick Benito, who we're going to have a conversation about in a little bit, from Oklahoma, who is the typical 34 edge rusher at about 250 pounds, but he's rail thin. Kingsley Enagbari from South Carolina, who sort of fits into the old Bills archetype. And then last but not least, I threw him in here, even though I don't like him as a prospect. I'm hearing some things from people I trust that Drake Jackson's going to go higher than people think, the edge from USC. So I threw him in that second to third round category as well. That's a ton of names that could come off the board in the first 3 rounds. Historically, I think last year, 33 edges were drafted, which is like a draft record. So that's good news for the Bills on one hand, because the more edges that come off the board, more other
Yeah.
positions drop to us. So maybe as Bills fans, we should be hoping and praying that edges go like crazy,
Yeah.
drop some talent to us at 25 or 57, et cetera. But Kendall, I'm going to start with you here. Any of these names at any point in the first 3 rounds, if you're like, man, if this guy slips here, I would really consider him.
It's really tough. Like at the point that the Bills roster is right now, it's really tough for me to say in the first 3 rounds I want to use a pick on edge. It feels like I don't want to use the word waste, but it does kind of feel like a waste because it's such a hard spot to make this roster right now with the way that room is packed. I mean, the one caveat I could throw in there is, the murmurs we've heard about Bills trading a player on draft day. Like if that player is AJ Epinesa, this is a completely different conversation. I would completely open the door to a possibility in the first 3 rounds. I don't know about round 1, but I mean, it's really tough to wrap your head around who the Bills would even be thinking about and what their archetype is now that Von Miller's in the room and all of that kind of stuff. So I can't sit here and pick a specific guy that tickles my fancy for what I want in the first 3 rounds. It doesn't seem like a great use of assets for someone that has a good chance to make this roster or contribute in year 1.
We got what I'm assuming Eric is chiming in
Yeah.
here from the Cover One account saying Bill Scout Pete Harris met with Josh Pascal for over 15 minutes as pro day. Listen, before we signed Shaq Lawson and stuff, I would have loved and I've been all over a guy like Josh Pascal, but I hope that 15-minute conversation was about how great of a blocker Darian Kennard and Luke Fortner are. I hope that was the conversation. But that would be interesting if the Buffalo Bills pulled the trigger on a guy like Josh Pascal. I think a lot of Bills fans. Listen, Brandon Beane talks about it. Interview after interview. I mean, he's consistent quarterback and the guy who gets after the quarterback. Every interview he talks about, though that he mentions it every like clockwork.
Yeah.
So Dave, for you, any of these guys in the top 3 rounds, maybe one of the first round guys you could maybe envisioning dropping to 57 or one of the second round guys dropping into the 3rd. Is there anyone you could envision and dropping to a point where you're like, I got to pull the trigger?
Well, 2 things. Firstly, the Bills have drafted 3 edge rushers with their first 4 picks, right, over the last 3 years, right? So they've drafted Epinesa, Rousseau, and Basham, right? So Epinesa obviously was a second rounder, but then Rousseau and Basham back-to-back last year. They've invested a lot already at the edge position in the draft, and then they went out and gave Von Miller that contract, right? So they've invested pretty heavy between the draft and now a big splash in free agency at edge. Do they go back to the well and go for another draft pick at edge early in the draft? You want to say no, but the fact of the matter is they've continued to go after that position in the draft. So never say never, right? And on top of that, by the way, a lot of people, including myself, weren't sure about people like Von Miller as a fit in the Bills scheme, and they went out and they went ahead and signed him. So that kind of just blows up my whole sort of perspective on what type of player the Bills could be interested in. Now, I will say Von Miller is uniquely talented, right? Like there's one Von Miller, and he is a proven commodity in the NFL. So I don't know that the Bills are willing to say, let's go draft a guy with a similar athletic, like weight, height, whatever, as a Von Miller and say like, okay, we're going to now start going after these types of guys as edge. Cause that's not really what they've done in the draft. Right. So as far as the first 3 rounds, I mean, Pascal intrigues me. Obviously he had the huge RAS, right? 9.46. All the scouting reports on him say that he's like a great locker room guy, right? And he's versatile. I think he could be a guy that would play inside and out as an edge in the Bills scheme, much like we envisioned Boogie Basham to be, right? And so are the Bills willing to go for another guy that fits that profile in Pascal? I don't know. As far as guys that maybe would drop that I could see, like I would potentially consider a guy like Cam Thomas or Nick Bonito in the 3rd round if they're
Ooh.
sitting around there. Edges go earlier than you think. We saw guys like Peyton Turner go in the 1st round last year. We saw guys like
now the talk is Logan Hall to the Eagles in with one of their 1st round picks.
And I was at my note on Logan Hall was like, is he going to follow in the footsteps of Peyton Turner, his former teammate from last year? And the thing is, if you look at Logan Hall's production in college versus Peyton Turner, it's nothing compared to what Peyton Turner did in college. But people are falling in love with him, right? And
the
so
versatility
they want. So it's interesting to see year to year how things kind of change. But I'm with Kendall on this. I think I would be I would justify it to myself, of course, if the Bills were to take an edge, and it obviously all bets are off if they were to make a draft day trade that involved AJ Epinesa.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I just don't see it. Picking 2 guys with your first 2 picks last year, already having Epinesa as a high draft capital on top of the big money you just gave Von Miller, it's just really hard for me to see that. Not to mention, like, I don't think the value is going to line up anyway for the Bills to take an edge in the first 3 rounds, to be honest with you.
We got, Pete Nana coming in saying, I take an injured Ajabo over all the running backs. Listen, I think he's going to go sooner. But if David Ajabo was sitting there in round 3,
if he was sitting there in round 3, that's real tough.
What if he's sitting there at 57? Would you consider it?
I don't think I would. That's tough. That's right on the precipice of what the hell do I do?
Because he's a first rounder otherwise.
I know you would do it, Judge.
Listen, David Ajabo was my edge number 1, ahead of Aiden Hutchinson, ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau. But this team is an all-in team, the Buffalo Bills, and that's why it's difficult, especially seeing, man, like, what if we had Creed Humphrey last year instead of Boogie Basham, and just some of these other things, that go through your head as you watch some of the guys that have taken a little bit more time to develop. What if we had J.K. Dobbins and not AJ Epinesa? Like, some of these things.
Just stop.
We're getting into a dark spot right now.
So I mean, I would pull the trigger at 57. I like Ajabo, but this is something interesting. You mentioned this, Dave. You hit on this, and it was the Von Miller sort of effect. And I want to highlight some names here because we got into free agency. I didn't even put Von Miller on my free agency board. I didn't think he was an archetype fit. I didn't even think the Bills would pick up the phone and call a Von Miller. I thought if they were going to chase an edge, it would be Nwosu from the Chargers. It'd be Chandler Jones. I didn't think Von Miller was on the Buffalo Bills radar. Not just, because of the money, but also because just of the scheme fit. Like, and I understand that in this day and age when there's nickel, et cetera, like, it doesn't really matter as much anymore, but you look at a guy like Von Miller and he does not look like an edge rusher the Buffalo Bills have had in some time. So I went through and I highlighted some names, and I don't want to sit here and talk too much about guys like Boye Mafe and Arnold Ebiketie because they're going to be gone probably in the late 1st, early 2nd round. Even though I think they're extremely talented football players, I want to sort of focus on guys like Nick Bonito, Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, your guy, Dave, D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky, Amari Barno from Virginia Tech, Jeffrey Gunter from Coastal Carolina. These are guys where I would never have even put them on my Buffalo Bills draft board until we signed Von Miller. And I'm not saying in the 3rd round, because that's where I have like Bonito listed, but if Nick Bonito fell into the 4th round, all right, D'Angelo Malone sitting there in the 4th round, Amari Barno sitting there in the 5th round. If you're the Buffalo Bills, are you looking at these players who might be like a little bit of a similar build to Von Miller to come in and sort of apprentice behind a Von Miller? Von, you go in, you take 70% of the snaps. This young buck will play the 30% snaps behind you, give you a breather. And they also have the, the traits to go out and be an ace special teamer for a year or two while also learning behind you, and will create the next dominant pass rusher behind Von Miller. Cause I'm looking at some of these athletic profiles. Nick Bonito, 9.86 RAS as a linebacker, 9.3 as an edge rusher, 6'3", 250 pounds. He's had 93 pressures in college since 2020, which led the Big 12. He had 33% pass rush win rate in 2021, one of the highest in this draft class, higher than guys like Aiden Hutchinson. You got D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky, 6'3", 240 pounds, and adding weight by the day. He's added 15 pounds this offseason. This guy's got legit speed to power. He's got speed and bend around the edge. He blew up people at the Senior Bowl. He really impressed people at the Senior Bowl.
Had a sack in the game.
And then you had Amari Barno, 6'5", 247 pounds, 9.73 RAS, ran a 4.36 40. That's 6'5", 247 pounds at the combine. His athletic profile, minus the 40, because he blew this other guy away. His comparison in RAS is Daniil Hunter. So you got guys like Barno, Malone, Benito. If one of these guys slips 4th, 5th round, if you're the Bills, do these guys that maybe you had never previously considered all of a sudden look a little bit more appealing to you? Dave, what do you think?
I mean, D'Angelo Malone's looking more appealing to me the other day. He's been appealing to me from the start, man. I mean, like, look, I get it. He played at Western Kentucky, but in the Senior Bowl, he was going up against, the best of the best. We're talking about a guy who has 59 tackles for loss in his career. He had a season with over 20 tackles for loss and 11 sacks. He has 32 and a half sacks in his career at Western Kentucky. The guy can get into the backfield. And he proved it at the Senior Bowl. He had a sack in the Senior Bowl, and he practiced well all week. D'Angelo Malone, to me, is a guy that when we started talking about the draft process way early on, when we were starting to preview the Senior Bowl, I was like, man, I really like this guy. But you know what? It's probably a pipe dream because he's not really a Bills archetype. And he's just more of a fun kind of conversation to have. Now, okay, signing Von Miller, maybe all bets are off. But again, you wonder if that's like Von Miller being uniquely talented and the Bills, going for a proven commodity that has had the chops in the NFL, multiple Super Bowls, multiple playoff runs in as a finisher, a proven finisher at the end of games. And it's just a unique situation. Or are they willing to kind of go that route, knowing that they already have 3 what I'll call bigger-ish ends now with Epinesa, Basham, and Rousseau all on the lengthier kind of, heavier, more archetype side that they get. It's nice to have that bend to your guy with Jerry Hughes gone. Von Miller, obviously from an archetype perspective, is the closest thing filling that. Yeah. But to me, D'Angelo Malone screams off the page to me. Now, he doesn't have a RAS score. I don't think he did any testing, but I would imagine if he did, he
just had his pro day today. Yeah, Bills were there, by the way. So a RAS score will be out probably shortly within the next day or so.
But, I mean, he's been the guy that I've had my eye on in the beginning. But Gunter is an interesting one. I did a little research on him today. I really liked him as a potential late rounder as well. That wouldn't
Bruce Bowman freaks list.
Kendall,
how about you? Like, are you buying into this? Like, is Von Miller the sort of the exception to the rule, or is this a direction the Buffalo Bills could legitimately lean?
I think he's more of an exception to the rule. I think he opens a window to start considering these type of players more, but I don't know if that window starts now. I think that window may start next year because right now they have to see if it works. Right now they kind of have to change the defense a little bit schematically to see if they can make the most out of Von Miller's skill set. Widen that front four, and by widening that front four, you present different type of run fill responsibilities. How are you going to drop a safety? Are you going to bring Teron Johnson in a little bit more narrower into the line of scrimmage? All of those kind of things have to be talked about when you talk about maximizing Von Miller, and it doesn't make sense to double down on that defensive schematic tweak before you know it works. So that's the only reservation I have, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it takes all those guys, like you said, off the table because they went and got Von. So why would that exclude them from getting a guy that's similar to Von? I want to echo Tilt's sentiments on Jeffrey Gunter. I think he would be like a perfect Bam Johnson replacement with probably more upside in terms of what he could do on defense. So I think his athletic profile translates perfectly to contributing on special teams.
I think Barnos does too with that 4.36 40 at that size. So
it does.
So here's
That's
the
a
thing.
good point.
But Barno's athletic because we before the combine, I was like, Amari Barno would be the perfect prospect to like draft in the 6th round and like develop as like a special teamer who can pass. So this was before Von Miller. This was before everything. Then that motherfucker went out and ran a 4.36. I'm like,
And
well,
you're like,
he's a
off the
4th
team.
rounder now. So because the Bills have done a ton of scouting of Virginia Tech, and I mean, you know, he kicked off the season real well. I think he had like 1.5 sacks in the first game of the season that I was watching them play. Like, I mean, he just really, you know, he just pops when you watch Virginia Tech's defense. And the Buffalo Bills have sort of, I think, always looked at that program and always had their eyes on Virginia Tech. Bill Basner says there's a lot of talent in the middle rounds, wide receivers, linebackers, edge. Do we trade back and stack picks 3,300? I think I would love it if they did. I don't know if Brandon Bean will. You know me, I'm sitting here, you know, lose my mind over Nick Bonito, D'Angelo Malone, Amari Barno, and Jeffrey Gunter. So you all know what kind of podcast this is. We love all the picks in the 3rd and the 4th round, I think. But let's take a look back at this edge board and let's take one final sort of glance at it and look for any late round guys. You guys mentioned Jeffrey Gunter. Dave, I know you're high on, Kendall, I know you're high on Alex Wright. Dave, I know you've always sort of been high on a guy like Michael Clemens. You know, there are some names here later on. I'm very high on David Anai from University of Houston. I really like Dominique Robinson from Miami of Ohio. Is there anyone here, Dave, that sticks out to you 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round where you would really like to see the Buffalo Bills pull the trigger? Maybe outside of a guy like Jeffrey Gunter, since we already talked about him.
Yeah, outside of Gunter, I like Clemens. I had him in my very first mock that I released a couple weeks back. I think from an archetype perspective, he really kind of fits the Bills. Like historic archetype, right? He's like 6'5", 265, 270. He's got a decent array of pass rush moves. He's had a, you know, modest but serviceable career there at A&M and has gotten to the quarterback, you know, at a decent clip, 12.5 sacks in his career. But I mean, at the end of the draft, that's kind of a guy that might be something the Bills would be interested in because he does have a decent repertoire. You don't usually necessarily find guys at the end of the draft with that, you know, usually it's one specialty move or another, or they have one trait or another, but he actually has a decent arsenal of moves. And the other guy that I just really kind of looked at today that I thought was an interesting one, I don't even know how to say his name, Ali Fayyad from
from
Western
Western
Michigan.
I scouted him from Western Michigan.
So he was
them Mac boys.
Yeah, 4th in all of college football with 13 sacks in 2021. But he didn't test well. He only had like a 4 point.
No, he's
something
not
rate
very
Raz.
athletic, and
but he was the MAC
arms.
Defensive Player of the Year in 2021.
I'll tell you now, I watched like 6 games on him because I had to scout him for SIS. Get off this hill. You don't want to die on it.
Okay. All right. Well,
that's coming from me. Like, please, like, if you want to die on the hill, like I died on the Zach Moss hill. So, like, please go ahead, die on a hill and be stubborn. I do it all the time. But I don't know. Ali Fayyad's athleticism, like the lack of athleticism shows. And if he were going up against better competition, I don't think he would have amounted to much in a better conference. That's kind of the big thing for me. It's like he made the most out of playing in the MAC. Like he really was their best player on defense in the MAC, and it showed week after week. But there were reps when he was getting bullied by MAC offensive tackles.
I'm off the Fayyad. I'm off the train. What about other? No, it's fine. I still like Clemens more. What about the teammate of Nick Bonito, Isaiah Thomas, who tested well athletically, 9.13? He was the 20th ranked edge for PFF in 2020. He dropped a bit in 2021, but he's a versatile player. He's moved all around the line there and obviously tested well athletically. And again, another guy that size-wise would be kind of that Bills archetype, more I would say towards like the Boogie Basham, where he would be more like a true inside-out or an outside-in type of guy. But I just thought it was interesting because I was looking at Bonito and then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. There's a guy here, Isaiah Thomas, who's also pretty interesting. But, you know, Gunter is my favorite out of all the late round guys for sure. But again, at that point, if the Bills end up with 8 draft picks or 7 or whatever they have, like, are they going to take an edge late? Like, it seems that to me, taking an edge even late is more of a waste, I think, in this draft. But again, that's just
And the thing too is it's like, well, I like Dominique Robinson. I like Alex Wright. I could easily see like some team drafting one of those guys in like the 4th round though. Like Robinson, NFL.com has him comped to Whitney Merciless, and I can see a lot of that with Robinson's game. And he popped at the Senior Bowl, and then you mentioned Alex Wright as well. I mean, these are 2 guys where we talk about like, oh yeah, 5th, 6th round, but like they can end up going in the 4th.
Yeah.
So that's really crazy. Kendall, any of these later round guys that really like sort of stick out to you? And,
Yeah,
and Jim Wickens mentions it. We were talking about it with a guy like Gunter, a guy who can also
Exactly.
play that Bam Johnson special teams role.
Exactly. The only one that sticks out to me is Alex Wright, and it's mostly from a production standpoint and an archetype
Mhm.
fit standpoint. He'd be someone that I think would push Boogie and Shaq for that run stuffing edge defender, the setting the edge, run defending edge defender, but also someone that has the potential to reduce down to defensive tackle on those sub packages. He could do that. I'm not
Mhm.
convinced that he can. I haven't watched enough film that tells me that it would translate in that way, but I mean, he's a big dude, like 6'5", over 270. He's got long arms, 34-inch arms. He was kind of clunky in his movements at the combine, but you can tell he has a pass rush repertoire, and he's so productive. Like you can't even lie about his production at UAB. He's like top 10 in just about every category when you're looking at him.
who was that
Only
UAB pass rusher from a year ago that was like really
Jordan
yeah, it was Jordan
Smith. I don't know if
something
it's
like
Smith,
that.
but it's
I'm gonna
Jordan
look it up.
something.
I'm gonna look it
But
up.
yeah, UAB, like they pump out good players. Like they're a pretty solid program. So I don't want to shortchange him because of the competition like I did with Ali
Jordan Smith, yeah.
Fayyad. But wow, I got it.
There you go.
But yeah, I like Alex Wright for the sense that he's an archetype fit, and that's the thing that really catches my eye the most. And then the production that supports that archetype fit, it makes a lot of sense for what the Bills do and what they want as an edge defender. But is he redundant to some of the guys here? Do we want to waste a pick like that to push a guy that's already on the roster that we think will get sufficient production from anyway? So that's kind of the thing I keep coming back to with Edge, but he is someone that definitely intrigues me if you're getting into those deeper rounds. If you're in round 5 and he's on the board, if you're in round 6, we have 2 6-round picks. Like if he's on the board in round 6, I'd think about it.
One last prospect I got to mention, and maybe Kendall, maybe you've had a chance to scout him because I know you did a lot of. Did you do Houston for SAS?
No, but I watched some Houston.
Okay.
Who is it?
David and I, the edge.
Not enough.
3-year starter. He had 5 sacks last year. He's a speedy, bendy edge guy. I know that before the season, Joe Marino did a scouting report on David and I. At 6'3", 250 pounds, and Joe Marino smacked a 3rd-round grade on him. That was before coming into the season, so I don't know what the update for Joe Marino's scouting report would be for a guy like David and I. But buried on the TDN, simulator as a linebacker, but at 6'3", 250 pounds, he sort of fits that sort of different, maybe possible breed of edge that the Buffalo Bills could look for. 3-year starter there at Houston. I've liked what I've seen and heard about David and I know he's local guy, Houston. So it's a free trip, but he's met with the Houston Texans already. And I also like to look at who the Dallas Cowboys meet with, because I feel like, Dan Quinn, I feel like some of those edges could, be a similar type of archetype to who the Buffalo Bills would possibly look to add to their defensive line. And David and I has visited there with the Dallas Cowboys as well. But again, local. So it's a freebie visit for them. It doesn't cost them anything in terms of their top 30. All right. Switching our focus now to the interior of the defensive line. I want to walk through here sort of the first 3 rounds, and I want to get your guys' sort of thoughts on if anyone here could possibly tempt you. In the first round, I have consensus first rounders Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. I'm almost tempted to take Devontae Wyatt out of consensus first round and move him into first, second round category, because I've talked to a few people that I trust that say like the grades on Devontae Wyatt vary. And there's a couple of teams that could love him and draft him in the first round, but there's a couple of teams that don't see him, despite his testing numbers, as a first rounder. So if Devontae Wyatt drops into round 2, don't be shocked. I kept him at first round because I think the testing numbers keeps him in the first round, but don't be shocked if a guy like Devontae Wyatt falls. Perion Winfrey, who was the talk of the Senior Bowl, had a really good Senior Bowl. Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. DeMarvin Leal. I don't understand why anyone likes this guy out of Texas A&M, but he'll probably go somewhere in the second, third round. Travis Jones, who my guy Ben Fennell today said looks like Derek Brown, and quite honestly is better than Derek Brown, who went 7th overall, which is pretty high praise from a guy I really respect in Ben Fennell. Fedarian Mathis, who we talked about as a fit for the Buffalo Bills, a 2-gapper. If he's sitting around in the third round, maybe that's someone who tempts the Buffalo Bills. A guy who blew up the East-West Shrine game, and I watched Brett Coleman break him down, and Brett Coleman was talking about how he interviewed Thomas Booker at the East-West Shrine game, and how this guy was just so intellectually smart and just knew everything about defense, not just his responsibilities, but everyone around him, and not just Stanford's defense, but all the different defenses. He said the guy was just so smart and such a great conversation, and that within like 5 minutes of him walking out of the East-West Shrine game, he had a combine invite because all 32 teams were drooling over him. So to me, that tells me that Thomas Booker is a guy who could go a little bit earlier than people expect. I moved him up based on those comments that Brett Coleman made from the 4th, 5th round range that he's going into the 3rd round. I think he's a guy who's going to go a little bit sooner. It's more intuition than maybe what you're going to see on most draft sites. You got Zachary Carter as well from Florida. The guy I dumped out of the first 3 rounds to make room for Thomas Booker was another guy who had a good East-West Shrine game, Matthew Butler from Tennessee, and obviously Otito Ogbonia there at the top of the 4th, 5th round. He's another guy who could maybe squeeze into the top 3, but it's not a deep class. It's a weak class. It's bad. So if like Devontae Wyatt slips, and then Perion Winfrey slips, and then Travis Jones slips, like we're talking like it could be a record low number of defensive tackles taken on the first 3 rounds. And then like the run comes in like the 4th or the 5th round. So some real value could drop here in this draft, but is there any dude at 25, 57, or in the 3rd round that could legitimately tempt you to make a move? I know we had the conversation. One tech is the position, so it might not be a Perion Winfrey, but Kendall, what do you think?
I mean, if Jordan Davis is still there, I'm still thinking about it. Like, I'm not like just taking that off the table. Like, are you trying to tell me, I'm not saying you, but is anyone trying to tell me that Daquan Jones stops you from drafting Jordan Davis?
No.
Because that's really where it starts and ends. Because I love the
Daquan Jones didn't sign a 5-year deal, people. It's a 2-year deal.
Exactly. So to me, that's a generational talent. Yeah, he might only be a 2-down pass rusher, right, or a 2-down player right now, but he's got loads of potential to be a 3-down player, someone that can just wreak havoc in the backfield in the run and pass game. He's just got tons of power, tons of range, tons of athleticism. He had a better combine than his cornerback teammate, Darian Kendrick. That should say something about him.
Darian Kendrick might not get drafted.
No, he's going to get drafted. His tape is good enough. He's good enough on tape to get drafted, but boy, that pro day did not do him any favors. Yeah, he's really the only one like in the early rounds. Travis Jones at 57 is really intriguing still, but I don't know. There's something about that 2nd round pick that I'm really valuing this year. And as much as I think he'd make an impact, and he's in a similar boat to me with Jordan Davis, where like Daquan Jones isn't stopping me from drafting Jordan Davis or Travis Jones. But for whatever reason, Travis Jones I really like him, but I don't know why I can't pull the trigger on him at 57 anymore like I once could. For whatever reason, the free agent signings, they are stopping me from taking him at 57, whereas Jordan Davis, it's not the same sentiment. And I don't know why. I don't know what the root of that is for me, but it is that way.
Someone earlier said it, like, I would love Travis Jones in the 2nd round, but I would love Calvin Austin even more.
That's the thing. It's the opportunity cost in the 2nd round, I guess. And I suppose that's the same sentiment in the 1st round, but I guess I'm a little jaded by the way I've been doing mocks recently, where, every cornerback I want is gone by 25, and I'm pigeonholed between Dotson and Olave, and Olave's probably not even going to be there in real life. So I'm okay with taking Jordan Davis. And it's a whole rabbit hole.
Jordan Davis. Yeah. If he's sitting there at 25, I mean, he just makes everyone around him better. I mean, like, that's just right. Imagine what Von Miller could do with freaking with freaking Jordan Davis in the middle, but
and Ed Oliver.
just one of the talent evaluators, one of the sort of content creators, talent evaluators, part of draft Twitter community, really like his takes. Ben Fennell. I mean, in the last 5 days, he's tweeted these two things about Travis Jones. Travis Jones equals first rounder with a cut up of a lot of the things that Travis Jones does well. And then he just dropped a bomb today on me where he said, I think Travis Jones is a similar but better prospect than Derek Brown coming out of Auburn. Brown went 7th overall. And to me, it just has me rethink like that right there. I have so much respect for Ben that just has me rethinking like Travis Jones at 57. Like you get Daquan Jones and Travis Jones rotating with each other on, one side, and you got Ed Oliver and Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle waving together on the other side. You got Von Miller rushing off the edge, and I'm just sitting here thinking about how miserable the lives of all the quarterbacks that we have to face this year are gonna be. And then if a guy like Travis Jones clicks, clicks, and he turns into sort of that alpha one tech, that sort of Chris Jones type of talent, I mean, fuck. So
It's
who
tough,
knows?
man.
He might not even be there at 57. But if he
after the
like
combine he put up, I'd honestly be shocked if he makes it to 50.
And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't think he is there at 57. But that's the whole purpose of this conversation here. Is
exactly
like, what would give you pause? Jordan Davis at 25 would give me pause. This guy at 57 would give me pause. I think Fedarian Mathis, if he got into the 4th round, would give me pause. He still might even give me pause in the 3rd round, but I don't know, Dave, who is a prospect here that maybe if they slip around later than they're projected to go would sort of give you pause?
Oh, let me get to Silas's super chat here. Do we take a one tech to replace Jones next year? Well, Jones is here for 2, so it'll be interesting. I don't know. I mean, you could draft one next year maybe, but I would say this, that list you put up, you had to taint that 2nd and 3rd round list with the Marvin Leal because I really liked every other guy that you had in that grouping.
He's so bad. What do people see in that dude?
Pull up that 2nd, 3rd round list again. That was a list to behold right there.
That's a great
Travis
list.
Jones, Phil Mathis, Thomas Booker, and Zachary Carter. Those 3 guys in the middle, Jones, Mathis, and Booker.
Yeah.
If any one of those guys are sitting there still in the 3rd round, no, Jones probably won't be. Mathis probably, Booker could be. I would be very tempted to pull the trigger on a guy like Thomas Booker in the 3rd round if you miss out on a Travis Jones and he doesn't make it to 57, and you really wanted to kind of put in a guy that you could wave in with Daquan Jones. Thomas Booker to me, I like Phil Mathis too. Thomas Booker to me, I think you're right, Steve. I would agree. I think he's trending up, and I would not be surprised to see him get picked on day 2. I love those 3 guys you had in the middle there. I would not be upset at all if Travis Jones fell to 57 and the Bills took Travis Jones at 57. Not upset in the least bit. Not upset in the least bit. If they went out and like a corner fell to them at 25, or they took a receiver at 25 and then they went and got Travis Jones at 57, I'm not going to be complaining. You won't see me complaining at all about that. I like those 3 guys a lot. I feel like maybe other than Booker, I feel like they all could be 2nd round guys. Carter, maybe not so much, but I do think Mathis and Jones would be 2nd round guys.
Good question here from Jessica Tennis. Kendall, I want you to touch on it here. Do you guys think that defensive line is designated or is designed to stop the run now? We are a lot heavier and deeper in the middle. We had that conversation. Like, I was like, man, the Bills need more 2-gappers. The Bills need more 2-gappers. But it's not like, other than Daquan Jones, it's not like they signed a ton of 2-gappers. It was a lot of 3-techs and stuff that they sort of went after and chased after. I kind of like get excited thinking about like how creative and fun this defensive line can be, especially with what Jordan Phillips used to do here and Shaq Lawson used to do here. But also Leslie Frazier is kind of a wet blanket to me. And I kind of like, like, is he going to squander all of this? Like, what do you think? How do you think this line shakes out? Especially like, I can see the pass rush potential. What do you think the run stopping potential is of this defensive line, the way it's currently constructed?
I don't really think it's going to change a whole lot because of what they do schematically, and what they do is less predicated on 2-gapping and more based around disrupting and penetrating, and then allowing your linebackers to make plays behind you. And obviously that's the scheme for everyone is the idea is let your linebackers eat and make those tackles, but people do it in different ways by deploying your defensive linemen in different ways. And what the Bills do is essentially tell your defensive lineman, like, this is the gap you're penetrating, go get disruptive. And then the linebacker has to read and react and see how that defensive tackle is playing, and then essentially fill two gaps and make sure that they're making the play and a proper run fill behind them. So I don't know if like any of the signings that we made really changes the effectiveness of what the Bills are going to do in run defense, but I do like that we got, a guy that in Daquan Jones that I suppose adds a little bit more juice in that department to what we had in Star, because I mean Star was obviously fading. And then Tim Settle offers, like we talked about earlier, Tim Settle offers that potential in his run stopping. It's not quite there yet, but there is potential. So I guess that's really the word with this. It's not necessarily that the Bills got better this offseason. It's that there's potential that they got better, and I don't think they got any worse.
I think talent wise, they got more talented, right? I think
Yeah.
Daquan Jones at this stage is more talented than Star. I think that Tim Settle is obviously a super talented player at still a young age and can do, one thing really well at this stage in his career. You have Ed Oliver, you have the talent of Gregory Rousseau coming into his second year, Boogie Basham. You added Von Miller. Like, the talent on the defensive line this year is better than maybe it's been in 3 years. And so that, to me, like, maybe schematically nothing changes,
Right.
but you have better players.
Yeah.
So by that alone, you would feel like they would be more productive in stopping the run.
Taking a look here now at some of the 4th, 5th, 6th round grades that I have, or projected grades that I have. Again, it's important to know this is where I think guys will get drafted, not where I would personally draft them. 4th, 5th round, Matthew Butler from Tennessee, Otito Ogbonya from UCLA, Owuzurike from Iowa State. These are all guys who could come in. Butler is more of a 3 tech, but Ogbonya and Owuzurike could play that 1 tech. They all had good. Butler had a good Shrine game. Ogbonya and Owuzurike had good Senior Bowls. Christopher Hinton, a 3 tech, where his grade is different all across the board depending on who you talk to. So I sort of settled in. I see a lot of people giving him 6th, 7th round grades. I see a lot of people giving him 3rd round grades. So I sort of split the difference and put Christopher Hinton there in the middle. A guy who I'm not buying as a 6th or 7th rounder. I think his Senior Bowl and his athletic traits gets him drafted at least in the 5th round. I'm going Neil Farrell Jr. from LSU. I know in most TDN mocks you can get him in the 7th round. I personally think that's a pipe dream.
Yep.
You got John Ridgway from Arkansas, who didn't test well, but he wasn't supposed to test well. A little bit of an older prospect, having played at Illinois State and then played at Arkansas. He's the definition of a 1 tech. You could probably get him in the 5th or the 6th round. Jaden Peavy from Texas A&M, big-bodied 1 tech. The Buffalo Bills actually met with him at the Combine. Matt Hennison is more of a 3-4 defensive end from the University of Wisconsin. Marquand McCall is a big old 1 tech from Kentucky. Eric Johnson, a 3 tech from App State. Noah Ellis, a big old 1 tech from Idaho. DJ Davidson, a 1 tech from ASU. And I don't even want to mention this guy because he sucks. Haskell Garrett from Ohio State.
He has a family, dude.
And
there's a couple probably said we suck at some point. We have families.
Someone literally tells me I suck on a daily basis. Mostly my students.
You should just respond and tell them that you have a family.
A couple of intriguing names as UDFAs too. PJ Mustapher. I really like Kalia Davis from UCF. Jonathan Ford is a guy who played on a defensive line with Gregory Rousseau. So maybe the Bills have seen enough tape. And I know our guy Otto likes Demetrius Taylor from Appalachian State as well. So, Tyrone Truesdale from Florida. He's got some fans as well. So some interesting names. Butler, Ogbonya, Owuzurike, Neil Farrell Jr., John Ridgway, Jaden Peavy, like Noah Ellis. Those guys, those names all pop to me as guys. And I'm sort of banking that one of them slips to like the 6th or the 7th round. That's where you can sort of pull the trigger on that 1 tech to come in and play behind Daquan Jones. I don't know, Dave, who is maybe one of these guys that really tickle your fancy? What round are you looking to get them in?
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Bills do end up keeping both their 6th round picks that they still have, I'd love to see them. I mean, we said at the top, what are you looking for? A 1 tech guy that can come in where you might have a whole Neil Farrell Jr. is the guy for me. He is that beefier guy. I think you actually have him probably rated more
Yeah.
appropriately than a lot of people have him. I
Mhm.
mean, like TDN, I know is lower on him than most, but he's 113th overall player on PFF. So they have him
Mhm.
sort of right in that 4th, 5th round range there. And he graded out as the 11th best interior defensive lineman in 2021 per PFF. And I
Mhm.
know you put some clips of him on Twitter showing what he could do penetrating wise,
Mhm.
stopping the run. So he is the one guy that stands out to me. If the Bills kind of have those 2 6th round picks and he's sitting there with one of those picks, and they haven't addressed interior defensive line at all, which they really technically don't need to in
Right.
this draft. But I wouldn't be opposed to them drafting a guy like Neil
Mhm.
Farrell-Julius, kind of like last year when we were talking about guys like Tonga and Tadarius Slayton as like late round 1 tech type guys. Like Neil Farrell Jr. is kind of that guy for me this year. So I'd be
Mhm.
happy with him in the 6th round if they wanted to go that route.
We got a comment here from Chris Jenke. He says, "We finally found a draft pick that Judge doesn't like." There are 2 this year that I really
Passive.
don't like, and maybe I was a little harsh in my words for Haskell Garrett, but him and Josh Jobe, not vibing with either of those guys.
2 out
Big,
of 700 guys Judge
yeah.
doesn't like.
Oh no, DeMarvin Leal. There's 3. We
Oh
got
yeah,
3
Oh,
on
there's
like
3.
so.
Yeah.
There's
There you
3.
go.
Leal's
Listen,
the
every
most
single player
prominent.
that we talked about today, outside of those 3, is going to be a future Pro Bowler. The
Hall
Bills
of
should trade
Famer.
back. The Bills should trade back, get like 23rd rounders, and just add up all of these future Hall of Famers in the middle rounds here. It's crazy how much we fall in love with these prospects, and like we sort of like project them into the league, and then like they get into the league and they get drafted by another team. We just forget about them because they never do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Maybe we shouldn't
Yes,
mention
sir.
that in the middle of the show. We completely
Nah,
know what
no,
we're
it's
talking
fine.
about.
We're smart guys.
Yeah, we know what we're talking about. Kendall, how about you? Like late round defensive tackles, anyone that like you're just really vibing on towards the end of the draft here?
Well, for what it's worth, how Tilt felt about the 2nd to 3rd round grouping, that's how I felt about your 4th to 5th round grouping. And I felt
Mhm.
like the value proposition is better there. Ogbonia, Farrell, and Ridgeway. I'm hoping Farrell slips into the 6th round, like you just said, Tilt, and
Mhm.
we use one of our 2 6th rounders on him. I think his tape speaks otherwise, and he'll probably be a 5th round pick at latest. Um, but yeah, I like his game. Ogbonia is a very powerful player. He shows some athleticism and range for someone at his size, very heavy hands. So I like the way he plays. He was a bully at the Senior Bowl. Like, I mean, just trying to bull rush everyone and just showing how powerful he was. And he was pretty successful doing it. He
Mhm.
doesn't really have a pass rush repertoire other than I'm going to push this guy. But I mean, that's kind of what you get from one text most of the time, just kind of collapse that pocket a little bit. But
Mhm.
it's about that power and what he can do reestablishing the line of scrimmage in the run game. And then I think it was Chris said to talk about John Ridgeway. I like John Ridgeway, but I'm not touching him until like the 5th round.
I agree.
He's super limited athletically, and Judge, you used it like he is a 1 tech, like he's literally the example of a 1. He is.
Mhm.
He's just limited, man. Like he is limited to being a run stopper, and that is it. Like he has moments where he's getting sacks on tape, but they're cleanup sacks, they're effort sacks. Like he has motor, but he struggles to move. Like
Mhm.
it really has to be fed to him to go get that play. And he'll make it in the run game because obviously run game, like if it's running right at you, the ball is being fed to you. And he has the
Mhm.
ability to shed dudes because he's powerful, has those heavy hands. He knows how to shed and I mean make a play in 2 gap. Like he's really good at eating
Mhm.
space and then shedding that blocker to make the play. So I like him in that limited capacity that he's good at. And that's why I think in the 5th
Mhm.
round, it's like that's the earliest I would take him where it makes sense for a way to make this team. He's someone that would be a great guy to develop behind a Daquan Jones. And he would also be a guy that you could, when we move on from Daquan Jones,
Mhm.
inevitably, he's a guy that doesn't stop you from drafting another 1 tech in the 1st
Yeah.
or 2nd round kind of thing. And he's good depth to have. He's just one of those great depth guys, in my opinion. So
Mhm.
that's why I think he's, Pete Nana comes in. He's a low ceiling player, but I still think you can spend a pick on him. It just has to be the right value because I think he could be a good contributor.
And
you just don't want to overspend.
Some teams might not want to use a draft pick on him because of that limitations, but the Buffalo
Right.
Bills, when you look at this roster, like where's a late round pick going to make the team?
And that's one of those places.
One tech and punter, where other teams might not be willing to make that investment. The Bills might, just because they might have a chance to make the football team. Got a couple of comments in here, Dave. I think you got to pull it up. I think it's just about that time. Time for the mock draft.
Let's get it going.
So Ombre Lob says, I want mock draft right now.
Let me just say this too.
Yeah.
The energy's a little bit different in the room when Ombre Lob's here.
Oh, 100%.
There's an energy about
a lot of
it.
capital letters being used. While you're pulling that up, we got a great comment here from Bill Baziner. He says, hey, Tilt, Judge, Kendall, who are your top draft crushes? Well, all of them would be a good way of summarizing it. And that is why one of the exercises that we do, Bill, that we usually do about 2 weeks before the draft, week and a half, 2 weeks before the draft, it should be a show coming up, is if you've ever seen the movie Draft Day, Kevin Costner takes Vontae Mack's name and he writes it down on a Post-it note. He writes Vontae Mack no matter what, and he folds it up, and he's throughout the whole movie, it's in his pocket, and you're like, what's on this Post-it note? What's on this Post-it note? And at the end of the movie, sorry if this is a spoiler alert, if anyone's not seen
the movie. The movie's like 7 or 8 years old.
If you haven't seen it,
he takes Vontae Mack first overall, and everyone thinks he's going to trade a quarterback, and he traded like 3 first-round picks, and the owner is just furious. But it turns out on the Post-it note, he said Vontae Mack no matter what. That was his draft prospect, no matter what. So what we like to do is we do a show every year where we each go position by position, quarterback through punter, and we each pick our one no matter what for each position. So it's the one guy that we have to pick that we will stand for at each position. We'll probably skip quarterback this year. So it's tough because I talk about wide receivers. I'm like Tyquan Thornton, Khalil Shaker, Calvin Austin, and I'm like a puppy. My eyes are just going everywhere. I'm like, I got to pick one for this exercise. So we'll be doing that exercise in a couple of weeks. So we'll go now to the mock draft because Ronald Ringler says it's getting late. We're not even we're just at halftime of the basketball game. So by the time we're done here, you'll get to watch the second half of UNC crushing Kansas apparently. But
so Steve,
we have
last
any
week,
rules?
That's what I was gonna say. Last week we did.
Right.
We're gonna just do one tonight, right? But do we have
one? Here's the rule. Here's the rule for tonight. Round 3 and on, we have to at least check in on the edge and D line to check the value if anyone's sticking out on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to select at least one edge or interior defensive lineman by the end of the draft. So starting in round 3, we have to check in each round to see who's there. And if anyone's sticking on the board at some point before round 7, we have to pull the trigger on either an edge or an interior defensive lineman. That's the rule of this draft.
I like that.
Here we go.
Malik Willis, number 2. I love it.
That's wild. Oh my God.
Stingley
was crazy.
12.
Finally. Can
Zion, ouch, 20. All right, we got a trade offer here from Atlanta. They are willing to give us their second and third.
I would do that.
Our first.
Can you click counter just so we can see? Actually, wait, check the other offer, but that is a good deal. Yeah, no. Screw the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Kansas City.
But yeah, definitely click counter on that so we can check the board. But I don't hate that trade down.
Kenyon Green's available. Devin Lloyd, Jahan Dotson, Olave.
Can we all talk about how Chris Olave is not going to be on the fucking board when the Bills pick?
Yeah, I highly doubt it. And if he is, obviously, we're running to the podium.
He's going to go in the top 10. I think he goes top 10.
Yeah, maybe.
He might. Honestly, guys, I wouldn't be opposed to taking Lloyd here. But I would also maybe take that trade.
I think who did a mock draft today where they took Devin Lloyd at 25? Was it Aaron Quinn? I think it was Aaron Quinn.
I don't know. I didn't see. I'm literally breaking down film for our film room tomorrow. A little sneak preview on Devin Lloyd. Yeah, I love it, but obviously the contingency is like, we're trading Edmonds and all that stuff. So I don't know.
David Ojabo sitting there.
I would take Dotson here, but I also have no qualms with trading back.
I would probably take Kyler Gordon, who's way down, not even available.
That's
but now I'm just drafting for need. So, but that's me drafting for need. I would take that trade with Atlanta. Well, like Brandon Bean said, man, the value in this draft is in
Let's take
picks
this
like
trade.
15.
Let's take
I'm
this
okay with
trade.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's go nuts.
All right. And on we go.
And
Oh,
they
we
took
should have tried to
Devin Lloyd.
get. Oh, never mind.
Hold on, wait. Let me just because this usually jacks me
Skips
up.
your pick.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Okay, here we go. We're back
Pause
on
it.
track. The
Elam
classic
is
pause.
on, Burks, Ritter.
All right, let's see what's on the board.
We're just decline that. We don't need another 6.
Yeah. We don't
Oh, yeah,
know.
true. All right, so let's just. We got Perry on Winfrey. Quay Walker is on the board. Tyler Smith, Kenneth Walker.
Kyler Gordon season, baby. To me,
Oh,
Kyler-
he's still there. Oh,
I
my
would take
God.
Kyler Gordon here. I would take
This is
Kyler
Kyler
Gordon.
Gordon season. To me.
I was gonna say
We
take
good?
Kenneth Walker, but yeah, I'm good with Kyler Gordon.
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
I think most people can be in agreement there.
Yeah.
I actually have to full screen this, so I can't see anything in the comment section. So my
Oh,
apologies
I'll
to
let you
those in the
know.
comment section. I really like that, and now we get an extra what pick
Did you
here.
just skip our pick? Oh, God.
No, I paused on us.
So
It's okay.
scary.
I know.
I mean, it's not very far trade back, but also we don't need the 6th-round pick.
Let's just.
That one just sucks. So yeah, let's just
Ooh,
decline.
Kenneth
those.
Walker is still available.
Oh boy.
Chad
Sean
Muma. Travis Jones.
Ryan.
Do we
Travis
take
Jones
our
is still there.
IDL now?
Oh, Travis Jones and Kyler Gordon to this defense.
Can you check the wide receivers?
Yeah, I can check. What's the? I don't have. I'm on the full screen. So what is
This
the
would be
comment section
Calvin
saying?
Austin season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would be between
Um,
Mechie and Austin. But
If you go back to the top of the board, like who the top prospects that are available, I think Travis Jones came off the board, correct?
No, he's available.
no, he's still there.
I mean, you got okay. So you're sitting here. You have Dylan Parham, who I know you're a big fan of, Kendall.
Yeah.
You got Jamari Sawyer. You got Chad Muma. You got Trey McBride. You got Travis Jones. This is what I'm talking about. Where
It's
like
the
we're just in the
opportunity
sweet
cost.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you still got Kenneth Walker. You got Quay Walker, who is a guy who could fit the archetype and slide into middle. Anthony Prohaska was talking about, and you guys are probably going to talk about on the show tomorrow.
Yep.
Quay Walker is a guy who could fit the archetype of sliding in and being the guy that you use to sort of hedge your bets with the Tremaine Edmonds here. But if it was me, I'd take Muma. I don't know. I'd take Muma.
Over Calvin Austin and over.
What do you guys think? Kendall, if this was you, who would you take?
I would take Walker or
Which Walker?
Kenneth. I would probably take Kenneth Walker. My biggest reservation is I like a ton of running backs later. But I really like Kenneth Walker. I think I would go with Kenneth Walker here.
Steve,
Yeah, I'm
who
not
would you go
liking.
with?
I'm not jiving with the. I would take Muma. I'm also okay with Kenneth Walker. I would second and be okay with Kenneth Walker here.
Tilt, where's your head at though?
My head is at. We pick up an extra third?
Yeah, my mind
So-
is now on Nicholas Petit Frere in the 3rd round as sort of the OG.
Well, I'll tell you where my mind's wandering to. My mind's wandering to going after a guy like Rashad White now in the 3rd with one of those 3rd rounders.
True.
And taking like Muma or Calvin Austin here or Travis Jones.
I know the Travis Jones one.
What's
is
the
so
comment
tough.
section saying?
Ombre Lob says just take Kenneth Walker, skip him, and have another Dobbins situation.
This is true.
Kind of got my blood boiling, not gonna lie.
It's right around
true.
this pick too. It was like pick 54
I think
or
it was
something,
57. I honestly
Right.
feel like it was 57.
Oh God, don't even
Do we
say
just
that.
take Kenneth Walker here?
I think we should. He's probably not even
This-
going to be on the
Alright.
board in real life.
Let's take him.
Let's take
Let's
him.
take
Kenneth
him. We'll
Walker.
feel
The
good.
Bills add a stud running back. 2 picks later, Chad Muma goes.
Hold on.
Travis
Travis
Jones at the
Jones.
first pick of the 3rd round. Steal for the Jaguars.
Yeah, that's big for them.
This is to move up 12 spots in the 3rd round. We could secure Calvin Austin, I think, at this point, unless you go back into do we just go in and just guarantee ourselves Calvin Austin right here? Swap the 4th for the 5th, give up a later round pick that we don't need, and is Calvin Austin still on the board?
Yeah, he's right here.
Do we just guarantee ourselves Calvin Austin and make this deal? I mean, you're adding Kenneth Walker and Calvin Austin to this offense.
What's the trade?
It's a 3rd, a 4th,
For their 3rd.
or a 3rd and a 5th. And I
My
think it's like
biggest issue is I don't want to miss out on an interior offensive lineman.
but you still have pick 89.
It's true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I say we do it.
I'm okay with it.
I want a go up and get your speed demon, get Calvin Austin here. You've now added a 3-down back. The Javonte Williams, in my opinion, of this draft in Kenneth Walker. You go and you add Calvin Austin, the Buffalo Bills, just add that speed dimension to this offense. 2 guards now come off the board like that.
We could go up and get Petit Frere here.
Well, wait, what's the board looking like?
That's just something you would never be offered in real life.
Unrealistic, yeah.
Yeah. I would just
Parham
let it
is
run.
still there?
How far away are we?
We're not getting Parham. Like, not a chance.
I would just let it run because I don't think that trade is realistic.
No, we can't take that trade. It's too unrealistic.
We'll let it run.
Benito. Is this more? No, again, just completely unrealistic trade here. Jalen Tolbert, Channing Tindall,
there goes Parham.
Zachary Carter, Troy Anderson, Ed Ingram, Petit Frere. Petit Frere. Do we have to give up a 7? Oh no,
right there.
we're picking.
Phil Mathis is there.
I would take Petit Frere here.
Can you check the actual interior offensive lineman just so I can see?
What do you mean? Petit Frere is Roger Saffold Jr. Where are we going here? Cole Strange.
Whoa.
Tempting. Justin Schaefer, tempting.
I'm okay.
Remember, we got to take an edge or an IDL.
Oh yeah, we got to look. So D'Angelo Malone is sitting there now with that extra pick.
Phil Mathis is there.
Come
on, guys. We're taking Petit Frere. Let's not kid ourselves.
The man's got a pre-draft visit with the Buffalo Bills. Nicholas Petit Frere. I'm loving this haul, gentlemen. This is what I'm talking about. Like, fuck pick 25, man. Give me 2 second rounders, give me 2 third rounders, call it a day. We now no longer have a 4th rounder. So 5th rounder is where we can maybe start looking at, again, defensive tackle, seeing what defensive tackles are on the board.
Feeling about our draft so far?
Edge
Ombre
rushers.
Lob is upset we just missed on Mathis, but I get it. I like Mathis a lot, but I just think needs-wise, I'm more comfortable with the interior defensive line than the interior offensive line still.
All right, we are on the board.
We just had a Wuzarike come off the board. We got
kind of sucks that Donovan West is still on the board right now.
Cam
and
Jurgens.
That kind of sucks, but
Cade Hall, Jeffrey Gunter, Thomas Booker, Tito
Ogbonia is on the board.
The thing with Booker, though, is Booker's a 3 tech.
Yeah,
that's the thing with Booker.
I know.
Ogbonia's on the board. So Ogbonia would be the pick here, I think, if you wanted to go IDL. But you could also wait till 168 and get Neil Farrell Jr. So to me, Ogbonia is the pick here, but that's if you decide to go. But if not, this is a point where you could start looking at a safety corner flex. Brian Cook is on the board. I know you're a huge fan of Brian Cook. You could start looking at safeties. I'm a big fan of JT Woods. You could start looking at David Anai there, the linebacker edge rusher that I'm a huge fan of. You could start looking at Damone Clark from LSU. He's going to miss the entire season with that spinal injury, but you could redshirt him a year and he would be sitting there waiting for you next year. Yeah. If you go back up to at linebacker, here's another one. Okay. DeMarco Jackson is a guy that our guy Merck talked about at length today on Twitter from Appalachian State. Kind of gives me some Shaquille Quarterman vibes, which is a linebacker that the Buffalo Bills brought in for a pre-draft visit a couple of years ago. DeMarco Jackson's a guy who, here's the thing, he's played like hundreds of snaps on special teams at Appalachian State, right? So this guy, he's 6 foot, 235. You can sort of maybe groom him to hedge your bets with Tremaine Edmonds. Obviously, maybe he doesn't have the upside of the starter that some of the other guys previously in this draft did, or even a Damone Clark does, but you know that you can maybe upgrade Tyler Matakavich's defense and replace his special teaming with a guy like DeMarco Jackson. So in the 5th round, that's probably what you look for there to maybe save you some money on that Tyler Matakavich contract. But Ogbonia is tough. Another interior offensive lineman. I would take Donovan West, right? Center guard flex, as opposed to the tackle guard flex of Nicholas Petit Frere. That's sort of a draft tactic that I throw out there. Who's available at tight end? Yeah. Kohler and Bellinger. Bellinger, obviously.
We took
Those are the
Kohler in
two I'd
both.
wait
We took Kohler in both of our mocks last week, so we'll probably mix.
I
it
would
up a
jump
little.
all over Daniel Bellinger in the 5th round.
We have another pick at 168.
Yeah.
so-
Mhm.
With this pick, I'm in between Clark and Ogbonia.
If it's me, I'd take a Bonya and then maybe take
See if Clark's there at 168.
Bellinger with the next one.
Okay. Let's take
Potentially.
Obonia.
Wait, how many do we still have 2 6-round picks?
Yeah, we traded a 7th, I think.
See, I'd use one of those 6 on a tight end. I wouldn't take a tight end before that. I don't know. This
I'd
is
take-
tough though, because this is like we have a lot of guys that we should be targeting here with
I mean,
with
Neil Farrell
Ogbonia,
Jr.
with-
is going to be available with the next pick
Yeah.
too.
Exactly. I'm just worried that Clark won't be there, and I like the idea of him just waiting to replace Edmonds if stuff doesn't go well this year.
I like
I
that.
mean,
I
we
wouldn't
could
mind
take
pulling the
Clark
trigger.
here
Take 2
and-
LSU guys in a row.
Yeah, we could do that.
Let's
You want
do
to?
it. Yeah, let's do it. I like that.
It's Klein.
What do the Colts think they're doing?
Ogbonia goes a pick later to the Pats.
All right. So now we can go
Um,
after Neil Farrell. Ooh,
Haskell
thought they're
Garrett
still
just sitting there for the taking.
yeah, because nobody likes him.
Is Juergens still on the board though?
Yeah, probably.
That's kind of
Yep.
the scary part about this.
Lacitus is still on the board, who's a guy the Bills like.
But guys, we have to take an edge or an IDL.
No,
in this
I
pick.
it's between Farrell and Juergens for me right now. I'd probably go Farrell.
Yeah,
Let's take
I would-
Farrell.
let's take Farrell here.
We satisfied our commitment to the
And now we
draft.
got pick 185, and I think I want to look at safeties. I want to look at tight end, and I want to look at IOL when we get to this pick
Same.
here.
Yeah.
Safeties. Oh, my boy Reed. I don't know if Verone McKinley's going to be there. I don't know how they're thinking here, but I really like Verone McKinley. He's got nickel and safety flex. So a guy like Verone McKinley, I like my Oregon DBs. Charlie Kohler and Daniel Bellinger still there. So that's interesting. Chris Paul, super versatile. Jatir
Ben
Carter,
Brown's
I think
there.
we all know.
Kendall's guy and Ben Brown is there.
Xavier Newman Johnson. Man, this is tricky. This is our last pick too. So we also could just take a punter if we wanted to. Just take Matarazza as a fill-in for generic punter. Jordan Stout, probably from Penn State, but
I'd probably go Bellinger here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
starting to get on the train of, and you can take Bellinger here. I'm just starting to get on the train of like Ryan Stonehouse or somebody as a UDFA. I don't think I need.
Oh, we have another pick.
Oh, look at that!
That's
we have
massive.
fucking terrible GM.
I didn't even know we had another pick. That's okay.
Go to,
Well, maybe
go to cornerback here real quick. I know where he took a corner.
I
And
double down still.
Kalon Barnes and that speed is something to definitely consider. But I was looking to see if there's any more safety flex guys. There's not.
Jeffrey Gunter is still available.
Gunter's still on the board.
we could
Amari
really-
Barno will not be there on draft day, so we're just gonna pretend like his name is not there. But Ben Brown is a Ben Brown.
That's
man.
also interesting.
Ben Brown sticks out to me like a sore thumb there of all those guards.
Let's look at the old all and see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Gunter is tempting for me.
He is,
personally.
yeah. I also like Stanley
Ooh,
Berryhill.
your
too.
guy Taekwon is available. But we
Actually, it
already
doesn't
got
make
Calvin
sense.
Austin.
Yeah, we have Calvin Austin.
Tyquan Thornton and Calvin Austin are nothing alike, by the way.
No, I was more talking about Berryhill when I was talking about that. There's
I was just
redundancy
thinking
there.
we already had a receiver. Well, we could double up on receiver.
Yeah, I'm still
This
open
draft
to
is
doubling
fucking
up on
tits.
receiver.
This
and
draft is
cornerback.
this draft is so good. It's like the best mock draft I've ever done in my entire life.
It's because I'm
Honestly, guys, I'm really tempted with Gunter though.
I am
I don't-
too. I like that.
But I like Ben Brown too.
Yeah, I also
And
like the
I like-
idea of if Petit Freer doesn't work out at guard, we have some element of hedging that bet.
I would take Ben Brown. That's
I'm
me.
okay with that.
Let's do it.
I like this draft.
I'll DM him this draft. Let him know that we're interested.
Oh, have
I'm a
another
big-
pick.
We have another pick?
Yeah.
There's no way. I thought we traded that.
Punter.
Oh my god. Maybe now we
Where-
could take
Gunter.
If he's still there, if Gunter's still there. Oh, he's not there. Dang.
Jeremiah Moon,
Clemens is
Kendall's
there.
favorite, Ali Fayed. Have we taken we already took a linebacker.
We could take a punter here, I guess.
Safety. Smoke Monday. Bubba Bolden. Okay, so this is the guy who was a highly sought after recruit at USC, transferred to Miami, played under Manny Diaz at Miami. Manny Diaz, Sean McDermott, there's a connection there. Definitely played a role in the Buffalo Bills drafting Gregory Rousseau. I mean, pull up Bubba Bolden's profile here and just look at this athletic profile. I mean, this guy is 6'3", 200 pounds. So he's a developmental free safety, a guy who's a center fielder. I think he brings a little bit of a different skill set than the guys that we currently have in Jaquan and DeMar and Josh Thomas. So I wouldn't even be opposed to pulling the trigger on a guy like Bubba Bolden. Smoke Monday is more of just a thumper, like in the box type of safety. So I don't know.
I feel like that's all Auburn puts into the NFL.
Percy Butler from Louisiana is not a half bad safety option late either. So yeah, I mean, it's pick your poison here. Quarterbacks, fuck. Who's available at quarterback? Not that we need one.
We got Breece Hall's teammate there.
What about doubling down at corner?
Sam Webb is intriguing. From Missouri
Armour
State.
Davis is still there too.
He's not going to be there in real life.
Tariq
Castro Fields is there. Tariq Castro Fields screams Buffalo Bill to me.
Tariq
Castro Fields, though. Yeah, I don't think he's going to last in the NFL though.
Jacoby Durant, I don't think he'll actually be there in real life.
Are there two DeMarcus Fields?
That's a great question.
I would go.
What about wide receiver? Is there any punt returners?
Isn't Calvin Austin the punt returner now?
Oh, that's true. Never mind.
Kevin Austin's interesting late round. I don't think he'll be there though.
No,
I don't think Kevin Austin will be there this
week.
Who's
available at running back? Ty Chandler's probably still there.
Bam Knight's there and Ty Chandler.
That's wild. They need to update this.
Dude, it's not.
Let's just take a punter. That's most realistic.
Yeah, no, it is. Just to say if it's one of these.
I like this draft. I like it. Big fan. So in this draft, we have added day one, in my opinion, starting corner, opposite Trey White and Kyler Gordon, a guy who I think really fits what the Buffalo Bills do on defense. He's also got that nickel flex. He's really good in the red zone, Kyler Gordon. He's just put up some really good advanced statistics in the red zone. You add a 3-down running back in Kenneth Walker, a guy who has the wheels to, break the big plays. Then you add Calvin Austin, that speed demon. What is one of the things that Brandon Beane talks about a ton? He talks about getting after the quarterback and having a good quarterback. He also talks about speed, and Calvin Austin brings that speed dimension. You got a guy to groom behind Roger Saffold at left guard to take his spot next year and also be your backup swing tackle, and a guy like Nicholas Petit-Frere. You got Damone Clark to redshirt for a year and hedge your bets against Tremaine Edmonds leaving. You got Neil Farrell Jr. to plant right there behind Daquan Jones. You got Daniel Bellinger to supplant Tommy Sweeney and probably supplant OJ Howard a year from now. You get Ben Brown to add to that interior offensive line competition. You add yourself a starting punter who's better than Matt Hawk. I mean, that right there is just absolute perfection of a mock draft. Make sure you take a screenshot of that beaut because that is definitely something we want to share to the world. That to me is beautiful. I don't think we're going to top this.
Let me screen espresso this one.
I don't think we're going to top this. I really do not think that we are capable of topping this mock draft.
Can we go to the trades? I kind of want to see how we pulled off these trades.
Okay, so Silas says Gordon is slow. I have a question for you, Silas. Is Marcus Peters slow? Because if you put Kyler Gordon's testing numbers next to Marcus Peters' testing numbers, they are practically identical. If you put their measurables next to each other, they are practically identical. I don't get how Kyler Gordon ran a 4.52. 4.52. That's not slow.
I mean, Montgomery Brown was 4.5.
It's the 60th percentile for corners, so it's not fast, but it's technically above average.
It's not slow. To me, especially with the defense the Bills are on, I mean, Levi Wallace played in this defense for how many years adequately, and he was 4.67. So I mean, I think that saying Gordon is slow might be a little hyperbolic. He's
Look at
not.
this.
He's not a burner, but I also don't think he's
Yeah,
slow.
that hurts.
Look
That
what the
hurts
Jags
too.
got with our pick.
Who'd they
God.
get?
They got
When we
Dylan
traded
Parham.
up to get Austin, they just sat there and got Parham.
Wow. I
It's
don't like
okay.
the other Jalen Watson and Yusuf Corker though. I mean, it's whatever.
Yeah, no, it's
They
really
blew it.
just Parham.
They're the Jags. They blew it. But I mean, really, what we did was we essentially
moved back to move up.
Yeah, we moved back to move up, and like we still actually ended up with an extra 5th round pick out of it. So,
So someone
and we
said
still had one of our 2 6th rounders.
So someone asked, how tall is Gordon? I'm gonna pull up Kaiir Gordon's measurables here. Give me a second, because I just want to unofficial
5'11".
unofficial 869 Raz. He's 5'11. He's 195 pounds. He had almost a 40-inch vertical, which is really good. 4.5 240. A solid 20-yard split at 6'4. A 1.56 742. Or a 742. 10-yard split. Oh, excuse me. A 1.56 10-yard split. Dude's a really good athlete. Like, it might not, and excuse me, it's actually been updated since his pro day. He's now a 9.68 because his agility grades were added in. And this is where he shows what kind of athlete Kaiir Gordon shows he is.
On the
His
tape
shuttle, his shuttle was 3.96, which is scoring elite on the RAS. And his 3-cone was 6.67, which again scores elite on the RAS. This guy is a very, very, very good athlete. And to me, it's more than about speed. And Silas says, I'm not talking a 4.5 when there are sub 4.4 guys with comparable size, length, etc. No one's asking these guys to run a straight line in the NFL. No one. They don't get into a track stance and run in a straight line in the National Football League.
And I understand that there are guys that run faster and they have better size, like Alontae Taylor. A lot of people love Alontae Taylor. I know you love Alontae Taylor, but at the end of the day,
but I wouldn't take him in the 2nd round though.
Kaiir Gordon's tape is so much cleaner than Alontae Taylor's. Alontae Taylor's projection to the cornerback position is just that. It's a projection. You're kind of hoping he pans out there, and if he doesn't, he's a safety. So I think it's a lot safer to say Kaiir Gordon at above average speed and elite athleticism everywhere else is a slam dunk in a system that's going to mitigate any sort of speed concerns. And we've seen that with Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace.
Yeah, I mean, Alontae Taylor 4.36 40, Cam Taylor-Britt 4.38. Like, I understand where you're coming from, and if we're sitting there in the 3rd round, I'm taking a chance on those guys all day. But in the 1st round, like, I personally believe Kaiir Gordon is a bona fide late 1st, early 2nd round prospect, and you're getting Kaiir Gordon and you're adding another 3rd round pick on top of that. So
you're telling me the Chiefs there at the end of the 1st round wouldn't consider Kaiir Gordon?
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure they would. I'm pretty sure they would.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, go enjoy the 2nd half of what I believe is a rout in the national championship game. Carolina Blue is going to be your national champion. I don't know if my phone dies. I don't know what the score is, but that should just about do it for this evening. Apologies for I get a little heated. I get a little hot under the collar when people come at Kaiir Gordon. Kaiir Gordon might be so Bill Basner asked me earlier, like, who is one of your faves? Kaiir Gordon is probably my guy of all of the guys. I have a huge love for Kaiir Gordon. He's one of my guys, and I know you guys like him as well. So, but at the end of the day, and Silas is right. I mean, if the Buffalo Bills do decide to wait, this is the argument I was having with people on Twitter yesterday. Like, everyone's like, you hate 1st round corners. I'm like, I don't hate 1st round corners. But if Chris Olave's sitting on the board, which he won't be, but if he is, I'm taking Chris Olave and I'm waiting to take Cam Taylor-Britt in the 3rd round. Like, don't pass on a really good player at 25. But the way the board had shooken out there, we had sort of made a predetermined decision that that's not realistic, that Chris Olave was there. We had a conversation back and forth, and we ended up trading back. So
yeah, we got him at 43. We got Kaiir Gordon at 43. That probably won't happen just as much as Chris Olave sliding to 25.
Ooh.
So
Kansas making a little comeback here, only up by 8. So All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for this evening. Before you head out, smash that like button. Really appreciate it. Appreciate it. Helps with the algorithm. If you were listening on demand, as always, thank you for getting this far. Really appreciate that. We'll make sure to timestamp it for your convenience so you can fast forward or rewind to any segment that interests you. Make sure to leave a comment. We'll always try to get back to you by our Thursday show, and smash that like as well. Again, helps the algorithm. More importantly than smashing the like or leaving a comment is if you are a fan of the Air Raid Hour, if you enjoy coming here every Monday and Thursday night, tell a friend. Like at the end of the day, just let someone else in your life who is a Bills fan who you think might enjoy the Air Raid Hour experience. I'd rather take a word of mouth referral, get somebody in here, a fresh set of eyeballs who's never seen the show before, and let them experience it and decide for themselves whether it is something that they might enjoy, and get another member of Bills Mafia in here any day over a like or a comment. Even though I'm not opposed to a like or a comment, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So smash that like, leave a comment, share with a friend. Always appreciate it. If you're listening in the audio platforms like Spotify, Apple, etc., make sure you leave us a review. Always greatly appreciate it as well. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, till next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?